everyone, welcome back to the Earthdawn Survival Guide, the podcast for all disciplines, paths, players, and game masters. With your questers, Josh and Dan, I am Dan.
I am Josh.
He's fresh back from GenCon, everybody. In today's podcast, we will be discussing all things quizzical, because we're going to answer your emails that have been sitting around while Josh has been at GenCon and too busy to get around to everything we've got going on here. So, how was GenCon? Because I've never been still.
Yeah, GenCon was good. I pushed my adventure development kind of as late as I have ever done it. I did have all of the pre-gens printed off and all of the stat blocks I expected to need prepped and ready before I left, but I was still making some final notes and getting a sense of what was likely to happen at the climax of the adventure while I was there. It all worked out fine. I had a good time. The people that were playing all had a good time. It was nice to have our games being played in the hotel we were staying in, so I didn't have to carry my stuff all over downtown Indianapolis.
Mm-hmm.
Downside of that was they had us in this massive ballroom that had like 36 tables in it.
Oh.
And whenever I was there running things, the room was like 2/3 full.
Wow.
Like 2/3 to 3/4 full. So it was very loud, very noisy, a lot of people, which can make things awkward to run every now and then. But for the most part, it went well. I enjoyed it. People enjoyed it. Getting the chance to see some folks that I don't really otherwise get to see was nice. It was good. I booked myself a massage for when I got back, because Monday driving back, I was like feeling all the tension in my shoulders and neck and whatnot. I'm going to do that. And so had the massage this morning, which really helped. Fortunately, I've got a couple of days off to recover. I seem to have avoided Concrud.
Yes.
Was pretty decent when it came to spending money.
But did you get your noodles?
Oh, island noodles. Yeah, I did get island noodles. I did get those one day, which was nice. It was good. I wouldn't say that it's the best Gen Con that I've been to, but it was enjoyable. I don't know. I don't really have a lot to say about it.
That's fine. Serviceable, recharge your batteries, got to spend time, got to run some games.
Yeah, we had a very limited number of Charcoal Grin plushes that, like the first ones off the line that got shipped to the hotel, 24 of them or something, and they sold out, or very nearly sold out.
It's a Black Dragon plushie.
I finally got my copy of the spell card box, as well as the hardcover Magic Deeper Secrets.
Yeah.
Because we just had the Kickstarter, there wasn't really a whole lot of new Earthdawn stuff. We've got several books that were recently kickstarted and are going to be available here soonish.
At least by Christmas.
I mean, the PDFs will be out relatively soon.
Fair.
The physical books, it's going to take time for them to be printed and put together, and waiting for other stuff so that we can have, the container that's going to ship everything out together.
Yeah.
Because of the turnaround time that it takes for everything to get printed and shipped and whatnot, our lead time on having stuff for Gen Con, is pretty significant. It used to be that we could kind of push things until, April or May. We can't do that anymore, and that's kind of makes things awkward. I mean, we will have all of this stuff that we just kickstarted will be available in print and physical form at next year's Gen Con.
Absolutely.
Hopefully we'll have even more stuff potentially available there, but that's all inside baseball stuff that there's not really a whole lot of info to give on this. So
no, it's all there. So let's get on with the questions, because people have been waiting, obviously, a couple of weeks for us to get back to them about what things that they've been asking about. This one's a little bit esoteric, and I'm going to say that right now, because this is from Chris, who's got a wild, wild question for you. Actually, I think for both of us. How would space travelers use magic to travel to Earth? I've been playing around with this idea and could use both of your options. I think he means opinions, but I'm going to go with that.
I'll be honest. I don't completely understand the question. To travel to Earth. I don't know what he means by that.
Fair.
If we take things from the way that it used to work with Shadowrun, making it kind of clear that outside of the Earth, once you went into space, essentially, there is no mana, there is no magic, no dual-natured creatures will be able to thrive.
Yeah.
Magicians have problems because there's no mana to draw on. Astral perception in space does weird things. Looking at Earth Dawn, there is no space. There is no space travel. So
yeah, I don't know if he's taking the idea of like Spelljammer and putting it into Earth Dawn or something. I don't quite know where this came from.
I don't know. Honestly, that's why I'm saying I don't understand the question. It is too vague. Ultimately, what you would do would depend on like what your goal is.
Yeah.
What is it that you're trying to accomplish? It's all made up.
Yeah.
There's nothing in Earth Dawn talking about space or space travel. You could use magic. You could create specialized, perhaps high circle magic where you have things like Netherwalk or an illusionist spell that does weird portal things that allows you to sort of play with distance. Yeah. Not true teleportation, but can do weird things with kind of astral-based travel. Look at potentially nether realms where you can journey, not even into astral space, but into another realm and potentially have that be something that allows travel in strange ways.
Yeah.
I don't have any thoughts about it because within the context of Earth Dawn, space travel is not something that's sort of in genre.
A possibility. Yeah, it's not exactly in line with everything else that's been published yet.
So if you want to write back in, Chris, with a little bit more information about what it is that you're looking to do or what story idea you might have in mind or what's going on that's kind of prompting this question, because clearly you have been thinking about it. I'm happy to address more specifics, but in this case, you could just use magic. And if we're talking about Earth Dawn, again, I would need to know like what is being attempted, what's the goal, what is it that you're trying to do. I really kind of need to know that before I could address whether a particular method would be effective or not.
Yeah.
Or valid or authentic or whatever when it comes to handling that.
I had two thoughts, but I'm gonna go along with you and just go, I can't answer that until I have more information. So I'm gonna hold my thoughts and just save time for everybody else that I'm not gonna blather away. So
it's not something that I have thought of within the context of Earth Dawn. If there is something specific that you want to address or ideas that you want to put forward and have me and Dan kind of look at them and say whether things hold together or not, happy to do that. But
not enough info in that question.
Space travel is not in genre, really. And so I would need to know what it is that you're trying to do in order to address anything.
Cool. On to the next one from Patrick, frequent emailer. This is about Alachi and the Books of Harrow, so shifting gears completely. Hey, Dan and Josh, hope you're doing fine. I just listened to the email episode 257, and a question came up I would like to know your thoughts about. The Books of Harrow are writing about an earlier scourge, if I get it right, and the immortal elves were there to tend to the dragon's need to an earlier scourge. Why did not someone of them already had all the information about that? That sentence didn't make any sense. Sorry.
Is there more to it, or is that the end of it?
I feel like that I missed something essential. Regards, Patrick.
Gotcha. So we actually got a second email from Patrick following up to this one. This email was written before he finished listening to our answers to that question where I went into my here's what's going on. Where it's basically like, but to sort of address it, that is an interesting question, isn't it? If you have the immortal elves, Alatia and Cain Buell and, the various other immortals that were around, presumably during the previous high magic cycle, during the previous Scourge.
Yeah.
Wouldn't they know about it? Yeah, they would, which is another thing that would kind of lean towards the idea that the books of Harrow are potentially fraudulent and were merely created as a way for the immortals to share this information that they had with the plausible deniability of them having been there before. Because for whatever reason, the immortals don't really like to have it be known that they are, in fact, immortal. We've had Alachia, who has been queen once or twice before.
Mm-hmm.
Other situations where there are immortal elves who kind of disappear and then come back later as their own descendant or something.
Yes.
But it's also pretty clear that these individuals, much like the dragons themselves, are protective of their knowledge and power, and even knowing that it's coming, would want to leverage that information in order to work their own advantage to some degree.
Yeah.
And so, they may know it's coming, but that does not necessarily mean that somebody else could not have found the authentic books of Harrow and managed to translate them and find out what's going on and go from there. But it does raise interesting questions. I mean, there aren't very many immortal elves when all is considered. They don't like to advertise their existence.
Nope.
And so the immortals did not need to find the books of Harrow in order to know what's going on. If the books of Harrow, if you decide that they are authentic, that's just something that was fortunate that allowed this information to come to light that potentially could have been something that disrupted whatever plans the immortals might have had for the information that they possessed in terms of wanting to leverage that for some kind of advantage as the next invasion approached.
Fair enough. All right, on to our email from Conrad. I think we've heard from Conrad before. This one rings a bell. Hi, Dan and Josh. Hope you're both doing well. I am. Thanks. Now that the Kickstarter has ended and the new books were successfully funded, I can't even begin to tell you how excited I am for more Earth Dawn on my shelves. Now, to the question proper. Having read the description of Haven Volume 2, I understand that as well as the new adventures, there are also a couple of reworked adventures included, which were originally published in the first edition as part of the Parleyth Adventures. Is there any chance at all to see a compilation of other reworked adventures in the future? Terror in the Skies, Mist of Betrayal, Infected, or Blades come to mind. For people like myself who only started buying Earth Dawn books in the recent editions, a refreshed and reissued classic adventures would be great, and I'm sure the hardcore fans who moved to the 4th edition wouldn't mind that either. And from the workload perspective for you guys, it's all there, so you don't have to start from scratch. Thanks for taking my question, assuming you did, and all the best, Conrad.
As of right now, the only plan is that when Haven Volume 3 comes out, it will include the other 2 adventures from Parleyth Adventures in that volume, reworked for 4th edition.
Yeah.
The primary reason that we did that for Haven 2 was to provide some degree of value add to that book. Mm-hmm. Unlike the earlier chapters, we never released, pretty sure, I'll have to check exactly where we stopped, but we did not release like Ashcan single volume versions of the most recent Legends of Barsate. We just had them be PDF.
Yeah.
So arguably we could have done a print collection of just those 4, saying, hey, here is how you can get print versions of these, since we weren't really doing the Ashcan versions anymore. But I still, because of what we did with Volume 1, where we included Masks of Fear in it because it was sort of a prologue to it. Mm-hmm. We were just looking at a way to potentially add value to the print book. And it made a lot of sense, especially in light of the discussions that Dan and I had about those adventures in Parleyth Adventures, that they would fit very nicely as drop-ins or additional material that somebody could use as part of their own home campaign, because they work very well in Haven, in Parlainth, and so on. So as of right now, other than adapting, updating the other two to 4th edition and to make them work with the Legends of Barsave framework, we don't have any plans to update or anything like that, any of the other adventures at this time. It doesn't mean that there won't be, but continuing to follow my own philosophy in terms of material for 4th edition, I don't want to just have things be reprints. Yeah. We're not going to do a 4th edition Name Givers of Barsave, for example, because 95% of the material in that book is just flavor text that doesn't need to be reprinted.
Yeah.
Okay, I understand that people like having print copies of stuff, but one, older books can still be found relatively inexpensively if you go looking
eBay's
for
a
them.
thing.
eBay, stuff like that. And two, we've got PDFs. You can absolutely go and get a PDF version of the book that has all of that text, which is 100% compatible with whatever edition of Earthdawn you care to run. And then, again, to use sort of Name Givers as an example, some of the material that was in there has already been updated and included in other places. Like, for example, the piecemeal armor rules show up somewhere. I forget exactly what book they were in. But like some of those mechanical things have been updated and included in other books already.
In 4th edition, yes.
Yeah. If we can find a convincing and worthwhile use for an updated adventure in a book, then we'll do that. But, that's something that we'll sort of make the decision on as it comes up. We're not just going to do an updated, here's a 4th edition rework of
Mist of Betrayal.
Or Infected or, any of that stuff.
Yeah.
We're more interested in putting out new stuff than just rehashing older stuff. I understand that people like the old stuff, but also it's not like there have been hugely dramatic changes to the rules that you can't take the PDF of those and either use the stat blocks as is, or do what you can to sort of make a 4th edition version of it.
That's why we've gone through all the adventures on this podcast, and at the end of those discussions said, what would you update for 4th edition? A, B, C, or none.
Yeah.
And that's what we've done. So if you want it, go get it and just listen to the episode of the podcast where we say, here's how to tackle this from a 4th edition perspective, if it needs to be tackled from a 4th edition perspective. So I agree with Josh. New stuff is more important than rehashing old stuff. At that point, to me, it's a waste of paper and time.
Yeah. If it's something that would make sense as a value add or something that would go along with another product that is being developed, fantastic. But our development resources are limited, and personally, I would rather devote those resources to what would be new stuff for our audience than to just rehash something that some people may already have like 2 or 3 copies of.
Yeah. I want new stuff. I want new adventures. I want new books. I want new things. So I don't necessarily need anything that I've already got updated, because if I've got 2 copies of the same thing. I want shelf space for new stuff, but that's me. And
I'd rather work on new stuff than just rehashing old stuff.
Yeah. That's the creative juices flowing, is the new stuff. So I'm there for that. On to one from Matt. Hi, Dan and Josh. I have now caught up with the episodes. Thank you for answering my questions on your last email show. I enjoyed Josh's headcanon books of Harrow theories. To continue in that headcanon vein, I would like to ask some questions regarding the passions, and he does have a bunch. What are the passions? Why do the dragons think that they are not worthy of worship? Did the passions cooperate to imprison death? Was death a passion? Does death being imprisoned just mean that the passions can't die, as mortals can still die despite imprisonment? Are passions just name givers who grew in power and ritually imprisoned death to become immortal? Side effect of ritual gave them a portfolio of influence. I hope these questions develop into another interesting discussion on your interesting podcast. Thanks for everything, Matt. So we can back these up and do them one at a time. What are the passions?
So hold on.
Okay, yeah.
I'm going to address the very last of those questions first.
Fair.
I don't believe that the passions were name givers that have ascended at all. There's nothing within any of the published material that gives any kind of indication that that might be the case.
Yeah, that seems a little far-fetched to me too.
Now, moving forward, I'm going to preface all of this with there's not a lot of concrete information about the passions specifically. I know that some people were not thrilled with the Questor's book because it didn't address really or answer any of the questions.
Left them kind of nebulous still.
Left them kind of nebulous, which I did on purpose. I was more interested in fleshing out Questor's, there's a reason the book's called Questors and not Passions.
Yes.
Looking and trying to kind of flesh out and give more information to have Questor characters, whether as player characters or NPCs.
Mm-hmm.
All that said, a lot of what I'm going to be talking about here is my own opinion, my own headcanon of the way that I approach and deal with them, and we'll go from there. So, all of that said, now we can go back to the beginning. What are the passions? That was the first question, right?
You are correct. What are the passions?
What we know is that the passions present some kind of, for lack of a better term, divine presence within Barsave. They are incredibly powerful and mysterious beings that clearly have some kind of motivation and interest in particular aspects of name-giver existence.
Mm-hmm.
That's about all that we know for sure. And we know that Questors are name-givers that have decided to focus their worship, for lack of a better term, on a single passion, and that relationship grants them powers from their patron. And those powers are generally in flavor of what that passion is related to. So, that's kind of what we know. Mm-hmm. Most name givers in Barsave, that is to say all but the dragons, tend to view the passions as these incredibly powerful, mysterious, divine beings that they worship or honor to some extent in a similar way that, for example, the ancient Greeks may have viewed the Olympian pantheon.
Yeah.
There are all of these beings, and when you are doing something that is relating to the area that a particular god is related to, that you want to pay them homage or honor them or sacrifice to them or do something in order to gain their favor.
Yes.
In order to do that. The reason that the dragons don't think that they deserve worship is because I would say the dragons know more than they are telling about the nature of the passions. They know what they are or know more about what they are to recognize that they are not the divine beings that most name givers tend to view them as.
Mm-hmm.
My headcanon, my thought is that the passions are, for lack of a better term, incredibly powerful spirits. Incredibly powerful. They may not even technically be spirits in the way that you have like ally spirits or beast spirits or elementals or anything like that. But passions, in my opinion, are incredibly powerful spiritual beings that may be native to some deep nether realm and have come to Earth for whatever reason.
Yeah.
It's possible, arguable even, that they are akin in some ways to the most powerful horrors. That is, the ones that feed on and tend to have a preference for particular negative emotions and whatnot. And that the passions may be related in that they thrive and derive sustenance from
Positive.
particular behaviors that just tend to be more positively viewed among name givers.
Yes. Every yin has its yang, per se.
Yeah. So incredibly powerful beings, so powerful that I wouldn't even want to give them numbers. I mean, strength ratings for spirits, kind of as we have them, kind of already go up to like 10 or 12 or whatever. And I would potentially put the passions at like an order of magnitude beyond that.
Yeah, well into the triple digits.
Yeah, like well beyond the reach of even powerful adepts in terms of what can be done. Unlike with most spirits, you can't really bid or control a passion. They are just too powerful. You can't do it. Clearly, the passions, however, can be shaped or warped or corrupted by outside forces, because we have the example of the three mad passions who had a particular form and presentation and portfolio prior to the scourge, and then however it happened, have new ones now, where they are mad possibly because of horror corruption, possibly due to what's going on with Ristul in the Abyss of Erasnahem. Who really knows what's going on? So, personally, passions are incredibly powerful spiritual beings. The dragons don't believe they should be worshipped because the dragons know more of what they are. What are the other questions that we've got there?
Fair enough. Was death a passion? And does death being imprisoned just mean that the passions can't die, as mortals can still die despite imprisonment? So is death a passion?
It depends on what you mean by passion.
Fair.
I am inclined to say that death may not be a passion. Really depends on your definition.
Fair.
Like, well, I mean, if we're going to say that the passions are...
defines it.
Well, Earth Dawn has... once you start taking in material, especially from like the Theron Empire book, where it starts dealing with other areas, you've got the passions that all died in Vasgothia. You've got the Crayonin passions.
Yeah.
Passion ends up being a much more nebulous and fuzzy term.
Fair.
I think that from a Barsavian in-setting standpoint, death would probably not be considered a passion. From an out-of-game, or from a like exterior, from our point of view, I could certainly consider putting death, what little we actually know of it, because all we've got are the couple of stories. Oh, well, death was imprisoned under Death's Sea by the passions.
Yeah.
Death, scare quotes around that, could very well be another like incredibly powerful astral/spiritual entity of some sort that has been bound by the passions for whatever reason. I mean, is a passion just something that name givers worship? You know, there are those who worship death, who consider death a passion. It would fit under that definition. But since we don't really know what the passions themselves are, it is kind of tough to say whether death is actually a passion, since we kind of know even less about death.
Fair enough.
I don't think that death being bound has anything to do with the passions being immortal, or the passions not being able to die. I don't think that comes into play at all. What else have we got? Have I addressed everything?
We've addressed everything. I just think that the passions and or death are just so high in, as you said, you didn't want to put numbers associated with these things, but those numbers are so unattainable for even the highest circle of adepts or other forces on planet Earth that they're not going to have any effect on these beings. So,
yeah, probably
whether they're
not.
Immortal or not is nothing we can answer, but we don't have any method to test that immortality. How's that? I'm going to go with that. Last email. This one comes from Brandon, but he's got a boatload of questions. So, Brandon, here we go. Hello. This is my first time I've written in. Thought you were new. Longtime fan of Earth Dawn, but I have some questions. In the first edition, Thrall the Dwarf Kingdom, on page 22, he gives reference. I like this guy. It speaks of the dwarven kingdoms of Kilea and Curzon as enemies of Scythia. And then nowhere else does it mention them ever again. What happened to them? Did they survive the Scourge? And if so, where are they?
Well, they don't get mentioned anywhere else. I would assume that they did not survive the Scourge.
That makes sense.
And there's no real indication of where they might have been.
I think that would be actually a question for Lou, but I agree that since there's no other further reference, perhaps, as Lou stated in our interview with him, sometimes you just leave these things in and someone else will pick up on that thread later on and maybe develop it. But I think you're right that it's a legend and then no longer counts.
Yeah, I mean, if they only showed up and were mentioned in the Thrall source book, that may be something very well that Robin Laws came up with and just dropped in.
Because he could. Yeah, I agree. So, nice, but I don't know if you can pull on that thread or not. Maybe you can develop it yourself. I don't know. There's some fan fiction. Number 2, will you be expanding on Landis, Ustrecht, or Scavia and the Grey Forest? History, present, status, etc.
There are not any current plans for any of those right now. Doesn't mean they won't be in the future, but there's nothing specific that anybody has floated about being something that they would work on. The Grey Forest would likely be something that, rather than being fleshed out on its own, would probably be included in a hypothetical revisit of the Crystal Raiders book, but I don't know that there's a huge need for that. Landis would be an interesting place to investigate, especially in the current situation with regards to Carafad.
Mm-hmm.
And we did kind of start to play in that space a little bit with one of the chapters in Empty Thrones, with the area that's kind of down there on the Carafad Landis border. So that might be something that somebody might want to pick up and develop. Ustrecht, the problem with Ustrecht is that there really isn't much of anything there active currently that would justify a source book.
Fair.
Or at least there's very little information sort of in existence other than it was one of those kingdoms that kind of collapsed back during the Orichalcum Wars, and while there may be people living there, there's not a whole lot of information already existent on it that could be fleshed out.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, there's no plans for that specifically.
At this time.
At this time.
Fair enough. Number 3, is FASA going to be doing any source books on other parts of the world? Kriana, Merak, Telea, Rugaria, Indricia, Arancia, any of those possibilities anytime in the near future?
There is a Kriana book that is in the works. I don't know exactly what the timetable is on that to be finished up, because I'm not involved in the development or work on that book at all. The Arancia book that was in development is on hold for now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whether those areas get expanded or revisited largely depends on somebody, within the internal team wanting to lead a project to work on it.
Yeah.
So as of right now, the only one that's currently under any kind of active development is Kriana.
Mm-hmm.
I will not say no, but there's nothing currently in our development plans to address any of those in the very near future.
Well, with the limited internal team members you've got to work on things have already been assigned, and someone would have to have the overwhelming desire to pick up that ball and run with it. And at the moment, they're tasked with other things, perhaps.
Yeah. With our resources and such, we want to work on things that interest and excite us.
Mm-hmm.
If nobody really has the desire to work on a Talia book for whatever reason, then there's not going to be anybody working on a Talia book.
Fair.
If somebody comes to us with a really interesting proposal and the indication that they want to work on something like that, great. But we had somebody that came forward with a Rugaria proposal.
Yeah.
And nothing ended up coming of it. There are a lot of cases where we get enthusiastic fans who've never actually worked on a published book. There's a big difference between coming up with stuff for your home game
book
and actually developing a full-blown source book.
Yeah, civilization, NPCs, adventure hooks, all that fun stuff.
It is a very different beast to do that. There are things that we need to consider when we're developing a book, whether it's rules or setting or whatever, that need to be taken into account, that stuff you're coming up with for your own home game, your own home table, that's not going to see publication with a price tag on it. There's very different creatures. And we've had enough examples of enthusiastic people who have come forward with an idea that has ended up not going anywhere for various reasons that we're kind of reluctant to
take every pitch that comes at you.
Yeah, to take everything like that.
Agreed. So, last question. In the first...
Let me follow that up by saying we are happy to have people want to write and develop stuff for us, but we're not going to take somebody new who's like, oh, hey, I have this idea for a Talia book, and come in cold, and we're going to hand them a 300-page supplement. They're going to need to be tried out to see if they can work with us. One of the things I think that I need to make clear is that if you are going to be working on Earth Dawn project in an official to-be-published capacity, you need to be willing to accept that there may be things that you come up with, ideas that you have that we won't use, that we don't want to use, that we can't use,
or
for various reasons.
Or isn't thematically compatible with what has been put out before.
I mean, whether because it's not thematically compatible, whether it's because we have other plans, we want to tweak something to make it fit something that we have in mind down the road. Ultimately, you would be writing that book for us, and therefore would need to be willing to accept that there may be things that you come forward with that just don't work, and you need to be willing to let that go.
Yeah, or rewrite it for the way...
Yeah, you need to be willing to accept that once you've turned the manuscript in, we may decide that we need to change things. There may be things that we add in that weren't something that you necessarily considered.
Yeah.
When you are a freelancer, it is a work for hire. We certainly want to work with authors to kind of help shape their vision, but we're not going to have a new person come in and do a 300-page supplement. It's not going to happen. You're going to need to work on smaller stuff, demonstrate that you can work with us, demonstrate that you can write material to our requirements, figure out whether you are worth working with, pleasant to work with, that you produce material in quality, that you don't vanish into the ether.
Yeah.
After saying, oh, I want to work on this book, handing in 3 pages, and then we never hear from you again. Our development resources are too limited to entertain that kind of stuff. And part of that is just from lessons having been learned over the past 10 years.
Well, and you can't just come in and expect to write X-Men, the comic book. No, you need to start on a little 4-issue miniseries first, prove your legs there, get your feet underneath you, see how it all goes, and then move your way up. In a couple of years, you can take over X-Men. I'm using a very bad analogy. But yeah. Things like that. So last question. In the first edition Theron Sourcebook, shifting gears, it shows the Spanish peninsula as the Slithering Waste. Was that just a filler, or is that a prelude to something more?
I don't know.
Fair.
Because all that we have about that is the reference or two that exists to the Slithering Wastes.
Yeah.
I think in the one place that it gets mentioned, it indicates that area was very badly affected by the Scourge, that it is an area similar to like the Badlands or the Wastes that are just to the west of Barsave.
Yeah.
That it is an area that for one reason or another was very badly affected by the horrors and the Scourge. But again, like a lot of early things, a label was placed there. It is a placeholder in the sense that, yeah, this is what we have decided is here. If at some point we decide to explore it, then we will explore what that means. But I don't think that the idea necessarily would be that, yeah, we're going to call it the Slithering Wastes here, and when we revisit it in a few years, it's going to be something completely different from what that implies.
Yeah.
As Lou has talked about when we spoke with him and in other places, stuff does get put in as a placeholder, but until somebody picks up the ball and runs with it, that's all that it is.
Fair enough. Brendan does say, thanks for bringing back an incredible gaming world, and thanks for the podcast. It has helped in my own somewhat unconventional games. Brandon, with your questions, I can tell it's a little unconventional, but I applaud you for sticking with it, and welcome back to Earth Dawn. So, any final thoughts on our questions tonight, Josh?
No, not really. I'm still maybe dealing with a little bit of post-GenCon punchiness, because I felt like I was maybe rambling and repeating myself a little bit more than I typically have in previous entries, but, it is what it is.
We'll fix it in editing. We'll fix it in post. We're all good there. So until next time, folks, email the EDSG podcast at gmail.com for your questions. And until next time, go to GenCon for your legend.
Well, not until next year. Good night, everybody.
Exactly. Make plans.